Modern architecture isn't just glass and steel, it's silent power. Every tower commands obedience. Every plaza deceives with openness. Discover how rulers shape our minds without words, using buildings as invisible thrones of authority that dominate generations. Modern architecture is the silent weapon of power. It does not decorate. It dominates. Every line, every tower, every plaza is a calculated move in the game of authority. The glass wall is not transparent, it is a mirror reflecting wealth and exclusion. The skyscraper does not rise to inspire, it rises to command, to make the man on the ground feel his insignificance. Ornament is weakness because it invites debate, but minimalism is strength because it tolerates no challenge. The ruler who builds with silence builds with permanence. Architecture in its modern form has become the invisible throne of authority. Where kings once raised marble palaces and emperors forged fortresses of stone, the powerful of today stretch their influence into glass, steel, and concrete. This is not evolution of style, it is evolution of dominance. For the old ruler shouted with gold and carvings, but the modern ruler whispers with silence, and the silence is more effective than any shout. The citizen who passes beneath towering skyscrapers feels the weight of hierarchy, not because the building speaks, but because it refuses to. The lack of ornamentation is its arrogance. The sharp edge of the wall, the endless glass surface, the overwhelming scale, these do not persuade with charm but impose with inevitability. Men cannot argue with stone that does not answer, nor with glass that reflects their own smallness back at them. The silent language of modern architecture reveals itself most powerfully in the city, time where towers rise like vertical empires. Each skyscraper is not simply a workplace but a flag planted by the powerful. Whose such as a structure is to declare dominion over space, air, and even light itself. The man who commands the skyline commands the mind. Look at the city dweller who walks through streets shadowed by towers. His vision is not of the sky but of facades. His horizon is controlled by those who built higher than others dared. He accepts without question that the ground is his realm, and the heights belong to another. This is obedience forged in silence. The cunning of modern architecture lies in its ability to disguise dominance as progress. The glass tower pretends openness while remaining unreachable. Its windows shine like mirrors, reflecting the city back at itself, creating the illusion that it is part of the people when in truth it excludes them. A plaza spreads wide and clean, as though it belongs to the public, yet its proportions remind the people of their insignificance in comparison to the structures around it. This trick is more powerful than any command, for it deceives while it subdues. The people believe themselves included, yet they remain outside the circle of power. The ruler who understands this silent language knows that architecture is more than shelter. It is stage, theater, and mask. He builds not to protect from rain, but to project control. The modern ruler has no need for a crown when a tower stands in his name. The glass palace is the diadem, the steel frame the scepter, and the plaza the throne room where all may enter yet none may rule. The people accept this because architecture surrounds them daily, shaping their movements, guiding their thoughts, and bending their posture without force. What sword could accomplish such a victory with less blood? The strength of modern architecture also lies in its permanence. Words fade, laws change, regimes collapse, but structures endure. The stone and steel of today will outlive those who challenge them. The ruler who engraves his power into the skyline ensures his legacy, even when he is gone. In time, his dominion speaks in silence. Every passerby is reminded of his presence through the towering monument left behind. Architecture is the art of binding the living to the memory of the dead, of making obedience continue long after command has ceased. Consider the difference between the decorated palace of old and the fortress of modern minimalism. The palace covered in ornament reveals vulnerability, for it seeks to charm and persuade. It admits insecurity by trying to convince. But the bare concrete wall, the sheer tower of glass, the severe plaza with no adornment, they do not beg for admiration, they force respect through indifference. They say, I do not need to prove myself, and it is precisely this coldness that intimidates. To decorate is to fear irrelevance, to simplify is to declare superiority. The prince who masters this silence does not need words. Architecture is also the instrument of separation. Where once a throne and a hall divided the ruler from his subjects, now skyscrapers, gated compounds, and exclusive districts perform the same function. The wealthy live above, the rulers sit behind facades of glass, while the masses remain below, and elevation is no longer symbolic, it is physical. To rise in society is to literally rise above the city, to belong to the time. The higher floors belong to powerful, the ground to the commoner. The one who lives above looks down not metaphorically but in truth, and the one who lives below looks up, measuring the distance of his own limitation. Thus, architecture becomes a map of hierarchy carved into the landscape. But architecture is not only about exclusion. It is about controlled inclusion. The clever ruler allows the people to enter his plazas, walk in his malls, admire his museums. He gives them a taste of belonging, but ensures that the structures themselves constantly remind them of ownership. The museum of glass and steel tells the visit is enlightened, cultured, part of a greater whole. Yet the very design, the guided paths, the overwhelming scale all remind him that he is a guest in someone else's empire. He is flattered but subdued, included yet excluded. And this balance is the art of power disguised as hospitality. The genius of modern architecture lies in the way it creates obedience without force. A man who enters a vast corporate headquarters instinctively lowers his voice, slows his pace, and feels the weight of surveillance without ever seeing a guard. The space itself disciplines him. The wide lobby, the cold light, the echo of footsteps. All these shape his behavior. No law commands this, no soldier enforces it. And the architecture alone does the work. In this way, a building is not just a structure but a silent law. And the ruler who understands this need not waste force where design already achieves order. Modern architecture speaks most clearly through scale. Small structures invite intimacy, dialogue, and challenge, but vast structures crush individuality, reminding the citizen that he is but a fragment. To stand before a tower hundreds of meters high is to feel one's own irrelevance. This is the purpose of scale: to awe, to silence, to paralyze rebellion before it forms. No man who feels like an ant before a colossus dreams of toppling it. He accepts his smallness as natural law. Thus, the skyline becomes a chain of obedience more unbreakable than iron. Silence is the most cunning feature of modern design. Words can be opposed, arguments defeated, forgotten, but silence cannot be argued with. A bare concrete wall does not explain itself, and in refusing to explain, it cannot be challenged. The person who stands before it either accepts it or turns away powerless. This is why modern architecture strips away ornamentation. Decoration explains, silence rules. The less a structure says, the more it commands, and the prince who masters silence rules more securely than one who shouts. There is also seduction in silence, a drawn to clarity, to strength, to simplicity that seems eternal. A building of clean lines, severe form, and vast glass surfaces appears inevitable, as though it could not be otherwise. This illusion of necessity seduces the people into belief that the world is exactly as it must be. They cease to imagine alternatives. They walk through streets of towering glass and believe this is progress, never questioning whose progress it truly serves. In this way, architecture not only commands bodies but shapes minds. The ruler who ignores this power is weak, for he allows others to dominate through design. A republic that builds without strategy exposes its insecurity. A corporation that settles for ornamentation admits fragility. Only the prince who shapes his realm through architecture ensures lasting command. He engraves his will into the very ground, raising structures that enforce obedience silently, daily, eternally. His opponents may speak louder, but their words vanish. His architecture remains, shaping the future long after they are forgotten. The silent language of modern architecture is therefore the most cunning of all languages. It does not beg. In time, it does not argue. It does not explain. It imposes, it intimidates, it seduces. It creates obedience without violence, reverence without faith, impermanence without justification. It is the invisible crown of the modern prince, worn not upon his head but upon the skyline. And he who builds with silence builds not merely for himself but for generations yet unborn. For the city itself becomes his monument, and the people who live in its shadow his unwitting subjects. The silent language of modern architecture is not art, but strategy. A plaza deceives with openness while reinforcing control. A corporate fortress of steel and glass pretends to be democratic, yet it separates rulers from ruled. Architecture convinces the people they are included, even as it reminds them of their limits. It is the throne of today, hidden in plain sight, where the ruler sits above in silence. To master architecture is to master obedience itself, for men follow all more readily than commands. The one who understands this truth recognizes that design is not neutral, it is political power disguised as structure. Observe how the vastness of a plaza appears to welcome the people, yet the sheer size of its emptiness makes each individual feel small. The openness is a stage on which the crowd is always the lesser actor, dwarfed by the facades that surround it. The ruler does not need guards or speeches, the space itself disciplines. The man who enters instinctively lowers his voice, slows his pace, and submits to the gravity of the environment. Such obedience is achieved not with swords but with proportion, not with chains but with silence. The building speaks without words, and its authority is unchallenged. The corporate tower, cloaked in glass, projects transparency but denies access. The passerby sees reflections of himself, not the life within. This is the trick of power. Time to appear open while remaining impenetrable. The workers inside belong to a world elevated above the street, and those below accept the separation as natural. Glass deceives the eye with its clarity while enforcing exclusion with its hardness. Thus, architecture becomes the perfect weapon of hierarchy, and smiling in its openness while keeping the distance absolute. Even in spaces designed for the public, control is ever present. Museums and civic centers are built with sharp corridors and high ceilings, not only to display culture, but to remind visitors of scale. The visitor is flattered with access but guided along predetermined paths, told silently where to stand, where to walk, and what to admire. The building grants permission to feel enlightened, while binding that feeling within walls that are not his own. The lesson is clear: you may participate in what we allow, but you will never own what we can. Architecture is permanence. Words fade, rulers die, but structures endure. A single tower can dominate a skyline for generations, outlasting regimes and revolutions. It becomes a silent sovereign, teaching obedience to all who live beneath it. Each day, men pass it without resistance, their minds molded by its inevitability. No soldier could enforce loyalty so quietly. No law could command submission so persistently. Architecture does what armies and decrees cannot. It rules without appearing to rule. The prince who grasps this truth holds dominion beyond armies and politics. He builds not just for utility but for obedience, not just for shelter but for supremacy. His structures are masks of progress that conceal hierarchy, symbols of democracy that enforce separation, stages of inclusion that remind the people of their exclusion. He rules through silence, through space, and through the language men cannot escape because they walk within it every day. To neglect this is to surrender power, for in the age of steel and glass, in time the one who commands architecture commands the imagination of the people, and the one who commands imagination rules them entirely.